Hey gang, I'm Fahaam, your financial freedom guru. Let's turn your dreams into billionaire success stories. Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of Daniel Guggenheim, a man whose name you might not hear as often as Rockefeller, Carnegie, or Ford, but who played a massive role in shaping industries that still influence the world today. Daniel Guggenheim wasn't just a businessman, he was a visionary, a risk-taker, and someone who understood how to transform opportunities into empires. His story is about ambition, grit, controversy, and legacy, and it's packed with lessons that any entrepreneur or dreamer can learn from. Daniel Guggenheim was born in 1856 in Philadelphia, into a family that already had some wealth. His father, Mayer Guggenheim, had started in the textile and importing business, dealing in goods like lace and embroidery. Nothing too flashy, nothing too glamorous, just solid, practical business. But Mayer had an eye for opportunity. He eventually shifted into mining, investing in a lead and silver mine in Colorado. That decision turned the Guggenheim family's destiny from modest success into international power. It was Daniel, though, who would take his father's small step into mining and turn it into a worldwide empire. Imagine inheriting a family business and not just keeping it alive, but multiplying it across continents and industries until you control resources that fuel economies. That's exactly what Daniel Guggenheim did. He joined the family business at a time when the world was industrializing at lightning speed. America was building railroads, factories were multiplying, cities were growing, and all of it needed raw materials: copper for wires, silver for currency, lead for construction and bullets, and a long list of other metals. Daniel realized that whoever controlled those resources wouldn't just be rich, they'd be powerful. And he wanted that power. The Guggenheims weren't just looking to own a few mines, they wanted to dominate the mining and smelting industry. Daniel spearheaded this vision, expanding aggressively into mining ventures in the United States, Mexico, Chile, and Bolivia. By the early 1900s, his influence stretched across North and South America, and the Guggenheim family had become synonymous with metals. He had a knack for taking risks that others avoided. Many businessmen at the time hesitated to invest in faraway mines because of political instability, rough terrain, or lack of infrastructure. But Daniel saw those as challenges worth solving. He poured money into developing operations in places most people thought were impossible. And the gamble paid off. Under his leadership, the Guggenheims controlled huge reserves of copper, silver, tin, and lead. Their company, Guggenheim Exploration, and later the American Smelting and Refining Company, ASARCO, became giants in the industry. Think of it this way: if you were living in the early 20th century and you held a coin, built a house, or strung up an electric wire, chances are Daniel Guggenheim had something to do with the materials that made it possible. But here's where his story gets even more interesting. Daniel wasn't just a businessman chasing profit, he was also a strategist who understood how to build empires. He consolidated operations, streamlined production, and created supply chains that made his companies efficient and dominant. Instead of scattering investments everywhere, he focused on vertical integration, owning not just the mines but also the smelters that process the ore. That gave the Guggenheims complete control over the industry, from extraction to finished product. It's the kind of business model we see today in companies like Apple, controlling everything from design to retail. Daniel was doing it over a century ago in metals. Of course, with great power comes great controversy. The Guggenheims were often accused of being ruthless monopolists. Critics argued they crushed competition, manipulated markets, and exploited labor. And to be fair, they were tough businessmen. Daniel wasn't in the game to make friends, he was in it to build an empire. Yet that cutthroat approach also made them innovators, pushing industries to new heights. They took risks, made investments others wouldn't, and in doing so, they shaped modern industry. Daniel Guggenheim's journey wasn't limited to mining either. Later in life, he turned his attention to philanthropy, particularly in science and aviation. Together with his wife Florence, he established the Daniel and Florence Guggenheim Foundation. This foundation supported scientific research, education, and above all, advancements in flight and space exploration. Imagine this, in the 1920s, when airplanes were still clunky, unreliable machines, Daniel believed in their potential. He funded projects to improve aeronautics, supported researchers, and helped lay the groundwork for the aviation industry we know today. One of his biggest contributions was the Daniel Guggenheim Fund for the Promotion of Aeronautics, created in 1926. This fund gave grants to universities, scientists, and engineers, helping to advance research that eventually led to safer, faster, and more reliable air travel. Without that push, aviation might have taken decades longer to reach its potential. Even NASA's early space research benefited from the seeds planted by Daniel Guggenheim's philanthropy. That's the mark of true vision, not just making money for yourself, but creating opportunities that shape the future. It's also worth noting the human side of Daniel Guggenheim. He came from a Jewish immigrant family in America at a time when prejudice was widespread. The Guggenheims faced discrimination, and yet they rose to power through sheer determination and business acumen. Daniel himself carried that chip on his shoulder, and it fueled his relentless drive to succeed. His wealth gave him the ability to live in luxury, to influence politics, to move markets, but he never forgot the importance of legacy. He wanted the Guggenheim name to stand not just for money, but for progress, innovation, and philanthropy. And in many ways, he succeeded. Even today, when you hear the name Guggenheim, you might think of not just industry, but also art, culture, and science. That's the power of a family that used its wealth to create institutions lasting long after their lifetimes. Daniel Guggenheim passed away in 1930, but by then, his impact was undeniable. He had transformed his father's modest ventures into a global empire that controlled much of the world's metal supply. He had invested millions into causes that advanced human knowledge. And he had left behind a name that still carries weight in industries, philanthropy, and culture. His story reminds us that success isn't just about making money, it's about how you use that money to shape the world. Daniel could have spent his fortune on mansions, parties, and luxuries alone. Instead, he poured much of it into creating a future where human flight and exploration of the skies became possible. That's vision. That's legacy. So, what can we learn from Daniel Guggenheim's billionaire journey? First, he teaches us the importance of vision. He didn't just see a mine in a mountain, he saw the global need for metals and built an empire to meet it. Second, he showed that risk is essential. He invested in places others feared to touch, and those risks gave him control of resources that fueled industries. Third, he understood strategy. By integrating his businesses vertically, he controlled every step of production, creating efficiency and dominance. And finally, he teaches us the importance of giving back. Even though he built his empire through ruthless determination, he chose to leave a legacy of philanthropy that benefited science and humanity as a whole. That balance between ambition and contribution is something every aspiring entrepreneur should remember. Daniel Guggenheim may not be the most famous billionaire in history, but his journey is one of the most inspiring. It's the story of a man who turned a family business into a global powerhouse, who faced challenges with boldness, who wasn't afraid of being controversial, and who believed in shaping the future. His life proves that financial freedom isn't just about wealth, it's about impact, vision, and creating something that lasts beyond your lifetime. And that, my friends, is exactly what we talk about here on this channel. Because financial freedom isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of building a life, a legacy, and a future that matters.